Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we have a mission to wake the world up to what's possible for healing, one brave word at a time. And here today to help me with that mission is Miss Carol Park. Thank you for joining me today, Carol.
Thank you, Laura. It's lovely to be here.
So Carol is part of a new book that we have coming out called 100 Poems and Possibilities for Healing. And you guys, I don't know how I didn't do a poetry collaboration before now. Like, this has been such a passion of mine, and I'm so excited to bring you this poetry collection with 31 of us poet, author, healers who are, oh my goodness, these authors are dropping wisdom and inspiration. They're sharing their stories, they're sharing their beautiful poems. And we also are sharing prompts in the book for you. And so I just can't wait to get this out to the world. But let me tell you a little bit about Carol, and then we're going to get into a cool conversation about this. So Carol Park is a professional healer. She uses pure healing light, yoga, tai chi, and qigong to aid the human and soul transformation. And Carol is going to share a poem today. I'm probably going to share a poem today. But Carol, let's start with, tell me a little bit about the why behind the poetry that you shared in the book.
The why behind the poetry. It was written, they were both written when I was in a space that was a bit mystical and out of this world. One of them, I was literally flying to Dubai, and I wrote it in Dubai Airport in the business lounge. And I was looking at the beautiful cloud formations and patterns, and just thought, this is a completely different world here. There are energies here, beings here. There are valleys and hills. And it was just a beautiful landscape that is so close to our world. And that's the state, the place that I was in when I wrote it. And then after the poems went off and came back, I must admit I read it and thought, what was I thinking writing that? But that's where I was at the time. I was in this mystical above the clouds world. And the other poem was written when I was in Thailand, and I had a beautiful view from my balcony with beautiful coconut trees, and then in the distance conifers, really tall conifers in Thailand, and then the ocean, the great Andaman Sea. And the coconut trees have a beautiful life of their own there, with the beautiful tropical birds right next to me in the trees, and huge bees buzzing around the flowers. It's absolutely gorgeous. And again, it was like the coconut trees seemed like beings in their own right, supporting a whole little mini universe. And that was just, I was so inspired with that. It really touched me. So that was really about climbing the coconut trees to the beautiful clouds. Like the two seemed to come together to me at that time.
I love listening to you talk about the inspiration. And nature inspires me so much. And that is often the why and the inspiration behind my poetry. I'll share one today too that was definitely nature inspired. And my why of late comes from just waking up into my mission also. And my friends, you, my community inspires me all the time to write poetry. The why behind some of these, mine tend to be long. I don't know, so many words come through, and I've had to get out of my way in terms of like judging that, like, oh, they're too long, people are going to get bored, it's too much, blah blah blah, right? And I need to get out of my head about that and let it move through. So that why is a little bit more about, hey community, let's grab hands and let's share these brave words out loud together. And that really fires me up. But listening to you talk about the gigantic bees, I'm like, oh, it feels like a fantasy world, right? But this is the beautiful miracle world we live in.
It is definitely a
Yeah.
miraculous world that we live in. There's so
So,
many aspects to it.
yeah, and I mean, I think it takes an awareness to show up in the world like that with that attitude. I see miracles all around me all the time. I know you do too.
I do, definitely.
What's the most important thing you want people to know about poetry?
That it's a beautiful way to express and escape. I think it can create beautiful shifts within. I think they poetry can be very uplifting as well. I tend to write poems as gifts for friends who are going through a hard time, and that simply happens. But if people are in a dark time and they can write poetry, I think it's also a transformational release for that as well. So it's such a healing journey being involved in poetry, and it took me a while to realize that.
Have you
I was
always
quite
written it?
nope. um, and I think I wrote him actually in my chapter as well about that. When I was a little girl, I used to write a lot, but that just, it kind of got blocked with things that happened at school. And for years, I didn't even want to know about poetry. I wouldn't read it. I didn't want to listen to it. If I read books with poetry in, I'd skip the poems. I think I don't want to. What a load of rubbish that is. And then suddenly, um, and this happened only in the last 3 years after working with you. Um, that writing channel seemed to open again, and suddenly I started writing poetry, reading poetry, buying books of poetry, looking at poetry online, and it's become part of my spiritual journey now. So made a huge shift just in about probably 3 years.
I
Amazing.
think it is amazing. I've written poems, funny little corny poems ever since I was 15 years old, but there was this middle section of my life where I don't think I did that at all for decades, and then reignited as an adult for, interesting similar reasons. It's like, oh, the healing tool of it. But what I wanted to add to your thing that you want people to know about it is that for me, what I want you to know is there's no rules about this. We're saying go try poetry, and it's a healing process and it can be transformational. But what I want to make sure you all understand is there's no rules. Some poems are one line and some are 1,000 lines, and some poems rhyme and some poems don't, and some poems move through you all at once, and you look at that and you're like, whoa, what is that? It took somebody else coming to me and saying, ooh, I love that poem, and the thing that I had read was a journal entry that day. And when that gal, said, oh, thank you so much for sharing that poem, I was like, oh, it's a poem. They're hearing it as a poem. And I realized there's just no rules to this, you guys. So sometimes it's just connecting to your heart and soul, quieting that mind, allowing yourself to open up, letting your heart open, and then seeing what comes out onto the paper, right?
Mm.
Anything else you
And
want to
then
say about that?
definitely, I think definitely it's about opening your heart and letting it happen. And it's your poetry. You can share it or not share it. It's enjoying the process that's very important. But you usually find when you do share it, people do love it, or maybe they hate it, but it doesn't matter. It's still triggering something in them, so it's worth it.
When I was in school, I learned certain things about poetry that really turned me off, and it was always about analyzing. And I always felt like I was reading these poems and I was meant to understand what they meant without the
Mm.
person there in front of me to tell me. It was, that in school we had to figure it out like it was some big mystery. And for me, writing poems as an adult is like, I don't want you to have to guess. I just want it to hit your heart and soul and for you to feel something with it. Mine are not meant to be analyzed or to have to try so hard to figure it out. And I just remember being so turned off by that in school. Was that also your experience a little bit? I think you said that earlier.
That, absolutely, that was my
Yeah.
experience. Yes, it had to be analysed, and you had to answer the teacher's questions the way they wanted you to answer them, not the way you felt or what it was
Right.
really doing for you. And I always got it wrong. I
Exactly.
never gave them the right answer.
And
Mm,
what
yeah.
a bummer, right? To shut kids down that way, like rather
Mm,
than just spark curiosity or inspiration or feeling.
mm.
It was too bad that the teachers had to go about it the way that they did.
It was, yeah. No, I can remember that I used to find that if I thought I put my all into something, I'd get a C or a C minus. But if I just did it at arm's length, or I'll just give them what they want, then I'd start getting the A's,
Oh gosh.
which is right. It's just not right. It may be different now, but in those days, they just wanted what they needed from you to pass the tests and pass the exams.
I think
Mm.
it is changing slowly, but there's some part of that system that's still a little bit the same. And I bet you there are a lot of teachers who kind of feel boxed in by the lesson plans as well. But all
Mm.
you teachers out there who are doing it more creatively, I salute you for inspiring your kids like that. So, Carol, let's read a poem. Which one are you going to read today? Tell us about this poem you're about to share.
Right. Well, this poem it's quite short. It's not one of the ones that's in the book. It's this poem that I wrote not maybe a couple of weeks ago when I was walking my dog, and um, I live in a village in a valley surrounded by hills and fields and farms and lots of sheep. And lambing season was well over, and for some reason there was a sheep in a field on her own. We've had two lambs, and this is what I saw when I was walking my dog through that field. It's a bit scribbly because this is exactly how I wrote it. So this is called the ugly sheep. My arm stretches to its limit as Sally pulls me down the steep grassy hill. I see the sheep gathered in a field. Will they move as we slide downhill? Half running, half skidding, wellies flying behind, and I see her, the biggest sheep I've ever seen. We enter her territory. Stamping her feet, she whirls and sways, protecting her precious twins. Challenging, she turns to look our way. Her neck is too thick, her snout twists to the left, and I see her, the ugliest sheep I've ever seen. She looks at me, and our eyes meet, huge, brown, and sparkling with life, full of intelligence and immensely wise. Our souls connect, our hearts join. Her love and compassion move me to tears, and I see her, the most beautiful sheep I've ever seen. So that's it.
Oh boy, what a gift. You gave me goosebumps. Yeah, I got goosebumps about a poem about a sheep, y'all. Like, oh my goodness. Only you could do that, Carol. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I I wanted to, well, thank you for sharing something that you just wrote that you really haven't edited much at all yet. And I wondered if you would comment about the courage it takes to do that. Is it easy for you to share things that are brand new, or do you worry about that?
I think I tend to be one extreme or the other. I think I'll share it as I've just written it, or I'll play around with it far too much to try to make it perfect. And it ends up messy and overly punctuated. And I try to be more professional, like a proper poet. But I don't seem to do much in between. I don't just do it, change a bit. And I think maybe I should try to aim for the in between mark a bit more. Mm.
I appreciate those comments about that. I will tend to write and share pretty raw to not same exactly the same I would have said about that. If I go back, it'll tend to be overworked, and there will be something that is removed from it because I do that, because I'm in my perfectionism mode or whatever that is. I love that poem, Carol. Oh my goodness. Um, all right, you guys, I'm going to read you one from the book. And this is called When the Sky Talks. This is that nature connection inspiration for me. And many, many times when I'm outside and connecting, I will try to get in a position where I can gaze at the sky without like craning my neck back, right? Just lay down or be floating in the river or whatever it is, and I get to look at the sky. So this is When the Sky Talks. When the sky talks in creeping moonlit clouds, splatter painted stars and midnight hues, I must be the audience she sees, waiting for something grand, hoping for no finale, but an endless show. I sit myself down, supported for hours of upward gaze, inhales deeper, expectations more attached. The sky would never let me down. She knows I only come when my soul's at stake, when I need to believe in something more sure. Looking up, I feel inside, light in the dark, quiet chaos, the place I know things fly. When the sky talks, and she always does, she reminds me what matters, grounds me in magic, tells me one more time that I'm more than all this, and sends me good night with a kiss sweeter than any lover. A touch so pure, my velvet coated dreams sing to me, and my silvery essence can finally rest in her deep shadows. The sky talks, and when I listen, more good things happen in the time it takes one passing cloud to move out of view than in a decade of thinking. And I begin to think I should come talk to her more often. So that is When the Sky Talks, you guys.
Thank you. That was so beautiful.
Thank you.
It really gave me a sense of how the dark is open and beautiful and nothing to fear. The sky and the stars, everything's so beautiful. Because some people don't like the dark. I've always quite liked the dark, and I loved it. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, for me, it's a dark sky or the morning sky. Actually, whatever that is, it feels so full of awe and wonder to me, and I love those feelings. I love being back in that feeling that almost everything we see around us feels like a miracle, but the sky is just one of those big ones for me. All right, I kind of wanted to wrap up, Carol, by asking you this one last question. If you had to pick one simple step to practice on a day when everything feels impossible and overwhelm is kicking in, tell us a little bit about what that would be.
I would do my Tai Chi form. I do that every day anyway, and it is the most beautiful practice. I practice a form called Infinite Tai Chi, which is a very extremely spiritual Tai Chi form, and it is uplifting, it's transforming, and there may be some days, if it seems more of a down day, I would perhaps practice it more than once, when then the energy is very, very high. But it can take 20 minutes to practice it, but it can also take an hour if you do it really slowly and really focused. So that's what I would do, my Tai Chi form.
I love it. I love that movement modality when that overwhelm is kicking in. You know, before we got on the recording, you and I were talking about the overwhelm of the holidays and how it starts to feel a bit hectic and frantic. And I know for me, when, you know, things start feeling impossible like that, I know for sure that it's what's happening in my mind that's creating that feeling of overwhelm. Sometimes when I'm looking literally at my calendar, that overscheduled calendar, and I start to do this thing in my head about that, and it has a physical feeling in me, though. That's the problem, but it's also the wake up call. So when I feel the physical thing, the constriction, the tightness, the feeling of tightness, of anxiety, I remember that one pelvic bowl breath can bring me back here in the now in my body, as long as I'm continuing to practice clearing my mind of whatever I'm making that calendar mean in my head, and um, embodied movement, all of the therapeutic kinds of movement, including what you were talking about, are so beautiful for that. Get back in the body, you guys, even if it's just one big breath. And of course, Carol and I could sit here and talk about the 100 different ways to help you drop out of that overwhelm. And we could put on a beautiful song, turn on the music, and that could be a way, right? We could get out our journals and write, and that could be a way. But you can do it, and you can do it quickly. It doesn't have to take an hour. It can take seconds to bring yourself out of that feeling. Carol, what else do you want to add about that?
I think that, yes, and I think when you're doing the kind of practice I do, Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga, it does bring you into your body, but it also works through all the levels, because you align for the physical, the energetic, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. So you reconnect with your soul in your movement. And when you do that, then you can do anything in the world, anything. Nothing phases you when you can do that. But it's literally the practice of getting into the habit and the practice of doing something like that. Whether it's just like Laura was talking about, coming into your body and breathing, whether it's a full movement practice, something that helps you reconnect, and that what's out there in the world, you can take a step back from. And when you do that, you can go back into it completely refreshed and renewed, and everything's different, easier and more flowing, much more ease.
I love what you just said. And when you do that, you can do anything. I feel that feeling
Yeah.
too. It's beautiful.
Mm.
Carol, thank you so much for what you do in the world and for being here today to share it with everyone.
Thank you for what you do, Laura. You help us all share our work. It's amazing what you do. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today.
You guys are going to love reading Carol's poetry and her chapter in the 100 Poems and Possibilities for Healing book. I can't wait to share it with everybody. Such an incredible cast of poet, author, healer, entrepreneurs in that book, really, really sharing their hearts and souls on those pages. And remember, you can come to our book launch party. That's going to be on January 12th, and that's in the new year, of course. I'm going to gather with all of the authors, and we'll be dropping some poetry and some wisdom and inspiration for you. You're going to find information about that event down below. And if something that Carol and I were talking about today just gave you goosebumps or sparked a question or whatever, just come on down, and I have Carol hooked up with her website there. Our authors are so generous. This is so much more than a book. This is a community of people who really genuinely care about helping you take that next step, answer that question, support your journey. So please come on down and explore her website, and she is up to some amazing things. You're going to find it at goddessembodiedyoga.com. And lastly today, everyone, if you're listening to this interview anytime around that January 12th date or after, that means the 100 Poems and Possibilities book is ready on Amazon. So you should hop over and grab your beautiful copy. And remember, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it is time to be brave. See you next time, everyone. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Laura.